Hello, tonight this is Texas Bitcoin Frontier Group. We've got the Austin and the Dallas Bitcoin meetups joined tonight with Stephanie, and thanks for joining us.
Hey Justice, thanks so much for inviting me. I wish I was actually there in the room. It looks like you've got a great crowd.
Yeah, well, and plus we have our meetup creating committee just entered the room, so we're ready to go now. Why don't we start off? Can you start off telling us a little bit about how you got involved in Bitcoin?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it started at birth when I was born an anarchist, as I think everyone is. But actually, sometime around 2011, I was listening to my favorite radio show, Free Talk Live, and they had actually, the main host of that show had just met with Gavin Andresen, who at the time was like, just promoting this little project he was working on called Bitcoin. I think at the time he may have actually still been in contact with Satoshi quite regularly. And a lot of other things were going on too at that time, like WikiLeaks was getting blocked from PayPal and Bank of America and all that kind of stuff. And so the issue of money, financial freedom was definitely on my mind, and it was in the news a lot. And when I heard Free Talk Live talking about Bitcoin on the air, I thought it was really exciting because it was money that you didn't have to ask anyone's permission to use. I just kind of got that immediately. And then some of my friends started using it because I live in New Hampshire and there's a bunch of sort of like liberty-minded people who live here because of the Free State Project. So that really caught fire. Bitcoin really caught fire with like libertarians, and they started buying and selling stuff. At first it was like sandwiches and things like that, and you could buy a sandwich for like, 2 or 3 Bitcoins from this guy George Mandrick who used to cook. And people started using it, and the first time I used Bitcoin, I saw how easy it was, and I thought, wow, this is really cool. And from that point on, I started reading everything I could about it on the internet, the Bitcoin forum and all that stuff, and also sort of learned by using it. So that's how I got into Bitcoin.
So you said, yeah, you got involved with Bitcoin by doing it. What was the first way that you used Bitcoin?
So the first Bitcoin I received was as a tip to my podcast at the time called Pork Therapy. It was an advice show, and I think it was Roger Ver who sent me like 1 Bitcoin or half a Bitcoin because I figured out how to install the wallet and put up a tip address. And I think I actually sent some as a tip to another podcaster. Or maybe I bought a sandwich, I can't remember, but I just remember using it for the first time and thinking, that's it, that's all I have to do. It's so easy.
And you were, right now you're still a host on, or you spend a lot of time as a host on Free Talk Live where you mentioned Bitcoin a bit. You're also as part of Let's Talk Bitcoin. When did Bitcoin start to become a career for you?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So at the time when I found out about Bitcoin, I was actually in a completely different career. I was working on my PhD in biochemistry. That's why I'm Dr. Stephanie, because I have a biochemistry PhD. I used to be a scientist. And I also went to medical school for a couple of years. I was going to become a physician scientist and do medical research, basically. And that career wasn't working out so well for me. I kind of quickly found out that it just wasn't very free. It was all about following someone else's orders and doing a project that someone else invented and thought up, and there just wasn't a lot of freedom in my schedule or what I was working on, and I wasn't very happy. So I started reading all these books about entrepreneurship, and I read like the 4-Hour Work Week, and at some point I think I heard Tim Ferriss say in that book that it's scary to change jobs, but the scarier thing is to stay at a job you hate for the rest of your life, and that just really hit home for me. And that was the point where I kind of said, okay, I need to change something. And so during that time, that was right about when I also heard about Bitcoin for the first time. So I was reading about Bitcoin. I was kind of finishing up my PhD. And eventually I did finish it. And instead of going on to sort of the next phase in that career track, I left. I stopped working in science, and I started my own business as a voice actor. And that was like a very radical change. You know, everybody pretty much said I was crazy. But after almost 2 years of working for myself and having my own business, I'm super glad I did it. I've never looked back. And I just feel a lot happier and freer, I guess, doing that than I was in science. And so the reason I chose to be a voice actor was because I had started podcasting back in 2009 as a hobby. Like I mentioned, I had this relationship advice show that I had initially started with a friend of mine as sort of a joke, but it spiraled into something that I really enjoyed doing, and it became more than a hobby. It became the thing that I actually looked forward to every week. When I wasn't looking very much forward to my actual work, my job that I was doing every day. And so a lot of people during the time when I was podcasting said, "Oh, you have a nice voice." And I found out later, of course, it takes a lot more than just a good voice, quote unquote, to become a voice actor. There's a lot more to it than that. But I started learning about it, and it seemed like the perfect job. It seemed like something I would enjoy doing. I could do it from home. I could do it on the internet. I wouldn't be really limited to like a physical workplace. I could kind of work anywhere. And so I just decided to learn all I could about that kind of career and go for it. And so right around the time when I quit science, this was in 2013 in April, Justice, you actually were a fan of my show, Pork Therapy, my advice show. We used to chat during the show while I was doing it. And you were into Bitcoin as well, and you came on the show and talked about it a couple times. And you actually hooked me up with Adam B. Levine, who was a guy who at the time was starting a podcast called The Daily Bitcoin, and he was going to do like a daily show about Bitcoin, and he needed a podcast intro. And so Justice said, "Hey, my friend Stephanie is, getting into voice acting, and she could do an intro for your podcast." And so I started talking to Adam, and eventually he decided that a daily show was too much work, so he was going to go twice a week and do Let's Talk Bitcoin instead of the Daily Bitcoin. And he said, instead of being the voice, the disembodied voice who introduces it, why don't you be on the show? Because you're already a on-air talent and you already know about Bitcoin, so it seemed like kind of a perfect fit. And so then we brought on Andreas Antonopoulos, and that was the beginning of Let's Talk Bitcoin. It's been almost 2 years at this point that we've been doing it.
That's a really great story. Just the ability to take a hobby and turn that into a career so that you actually enjoy what you do every day. What would you say to people who are thinking about doing that, and in what ways do you think Bitcoin might be able to help them with that process?
Oh my gosh, there's so many different ways that Bitcoin can help you become freer. First of all, it's the money of the internet. Everybody here knows that. But it becomes really important when you're starting out as like a freelancer or a consultant, or even just someone who sells a digital product, perhaps someone who works on the internet. Every freelancer has issues with cash flow and has issues with PayPal. I just received a payment today through PayPal and they froze it because the person's account wasn't verified or something like that, or they didn't like it for whatever reason. And so those issues can really hurt you when you're depending on those payments to come in. And with Bitcoin, you just don't have those issues at all. I think I read a survey when I was doing research on this once that said it was something like 75% of small businesses, which most businesses are small businesses. I think like 95% of businesses have 5 or less employees or something in the United States. So it's quite a lot that are smaller businesses. And 75% of those had cash flow issues every month. They didn't know if they were going to have the money coming in to be able to cover their bills. And with Bitcoin, you just don't have that problem. It's getting to the point where you can buy almost anything with Bitcoin, any kind of supplies that you need for your business, or even just living expenses if you're paying yourself. You can use Bitcoin to get those. And so it really solves the cash flow problem and the problem of like having clients around the world. I just did a Spanish language voiceover earlier this weekend for a client who's in Germany, and he paid with Bitcoin. And it's so cool to have that globalness, everything coming together, and the ease of getting paid with Bitcoin is just so cool. But it's more than that too. I mean, because if you are doing anything that's kind of politically unpopular, let's just say, I was talking with Connie Galippi of BitPay, BitGive. Her brother is the CEO of BitPay, but she's from BitGive. She's got a charity. And she said something like, well, what if you don't want your church to know that you're donating to Planned Parenthood or something like that? That's one example. But you could also say, like, what if you want to donate to WikiLeaks back in 2010 and you don't want anybody to know about it, and you actually can't donate to WikiLeaks by any other means because PayPal and all the credit cards and Bank of America have blocked them. So Bitcoin is more than just an easy way to get paid. It's actually speech. It's actually free speech, and anyone who works on the internet, I think, knows the value of that or gets to know it at some point, how important the ability to speak freely is. So what would I say to someone who wants to do the same thing as I did? I guess the options are totally unlimited with Bitcoin. If you know how to build a website, if you know how to use WordPress, you can integrate Bitcoin into your website incredibly easily and build a top-notch, e-commerce site selling your product with Bitcoin, and then you have another way to get paid where you don't have to worry about someone else arbitrarily freezing and seizing your money. Also, Bitcoin can allow you to work with clients. It can kind of open up your ability to work with clients who you wouldn't otherwise be able to meet. For instance, from the U.S., you can't send PayPal payments to places like Egypt, Afghanistan, Iraq, and I know there's a blog. There's like a singer-songwriter in Iran, I believe, and he had some music on his website, and he put up the option for people to give him Bitcoin tips, because that was literally like the only way that he could get payments from people in places like the U.S. So it just opens up your ability to work with clients or to receive tips from people that you might not otherwise be able to be in touch with so easily. So yeah, more clients just equals more opportunities.
It's interesting that you describe Bitcoin kind of as in terms of free speech, and obviously that's been a big help for you and developing your new career. Since you've been around in Bitcoin since longer than most people, if you started in 2011, how well would you say the Bitcoin community today reflects those same ideals that attracted you to it back in 2011?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, I have to say that my first couple of years in Bitcoin were more enjoyable for me than the last couple of years, because as more people have come into the Bitcoin world, the principles kind of get watered down. It's like anything that goes mainstream. There isn't really that fiery passion about freedom and privacy and money as a form of speech anymore. It's all about how can we create a slightly better PayPal, and how can we kind of work with the regulators? I mean, you even see people like Charlie Shrem. I mean, the poor guy, he started an amazing Bitcoin company that helped a lot of people in those early days get Bitcoin. It was actually BitInstant was an advertiser on the radio show Free Talk Live back when I found out about Bitcoin. And you could go to like any store, give them some cash, and you go to CVS or something, give them some cash, and you'd have Bitcoins in a couple of minutes. It was really cool. But yeah, I mean, he even basically tried to kind of work with the regulators and please all these people who were wanting to have power over the Bitcoin world, and he really bought into that paradigm. He really kind of inserted himself into it and started to believe it, and look what happened to him. I mean, now he's going to jail for 2 years, and it's so unfortunate. Even sort of his rhetoric has sort of reflected this, well, justice was served, this was the right thing, and I still don't think that he did anything wrong, and it's sad to see that he thinks he did something wrong if he actually believes what he's saying. So yeah, just examples like that. Even even people that were in relatively early, I think some of them have sort of, maybe they're scared, which I don't blame them for. But no matter how scared you are of the government sort of cracking down on you, you don't have to give them your moral support. Being silent is better than sort of giving them that moral support in rhetoric. So yeah, I guess I'm a little disappointed with the status of the Bitcoin community right now as compared to a couple of years ago, if I'm totally honest. But there still are a lot of great people in Bitcoin, and like Justice, I'm really impressed with your project that you're working on right now called the Open Bitcoin Privacy Project, where you're rating these different Bitcoin wallets, and your collaborators are too, on their financial privacy. I think that's something that's really the thing that can help steer Bitcoin back on track as far as its founding principles. That sounds too much like founding fathers, but basically the way that Satoshi intended it to be.
Yeah, thanks for that. We started the Open Bitcoin Privacy Project because we noticed that there wasn't a lot of other organized effort to help people be aware of just what the state of Bitcoin privacy was. And we've encountered people who are writing wallets who do care about privacy, but because they're so busy or otherwise occupied, they haven't really had the time to just sit down and think about what to do if they want to make their wallet more private. And we've already gotten some feedback that just having a list of bullet points is helpful. And so we're already hopeful that that's going to encourage at least the wallet development side. So one last question that I have before we open up for Q&A from the Dallas and the Austin side is, what do you think, or is there anything you can think of that we could do to help reach out to the people in the world who most need Bitcoin as a form of improving their amount of free speech?
That's a great question. I think it's such a complicated question, and if it were easy, it would have been done already. I had this interview once with Richard Bowes, who is a Bitcoin enthusiast. He lives in London, but he decided he was going to go to Kenya, and he was going to teach people how to use Bitcoin and go to some schools and orphanages and give them tablets and give them some Bitcoin and teach them how to use it. And he just had problem after problem, from everything from the fact that you can't get internet there. Mobile data is like super expensive compared to what people earn. They might be spending 10% of their weekly paycheck on just a few megabytes of mobile data. And they didn't trust Bitcoin. They didn't trust these white people who are coming in and saying, hey, we're going to solve all your problems, just do this. And they were kind of skeptical of the price volatility as well. They couldn't honestly afford to lose like most of their Bitcoin to volatility, or most of the value of their Bitcoin to volatility. And there were just like so many problems. And so I don't really know what the answer to that is. I think it's going to be a case-by-case basis, because every part of the world is different and everybody's situation is different. If I knew someone who was really in need of Bitcoin, I would try to teach them how to use it, just on a person-to-person basis. Like, let's go peer-to-peer, just like Bitcoin started. I remember when I first heard about Bitcoin, shortly after I first heard about Bitcoin, I read about this woman in Egypt who, and by the way, Egypt is one of the places in the world where you can't send PayPal payments from the U.S. You can send Western Union, but it's very expensive and you have to fill out all this paperwork and stuff. So Egypt is difficult to send money to from the U.S. And this woman was an atheist, or she is an atheist, and her family was religious, and she lived with her family, and she would not wear this veil over her face, and her dad had her basically incarcerated in this mental institution because of that, where she was beat up and drugged against her will, and all this horrible stuff happened to her. And she wanted to get to New York City because she had some kind of a contact in New York City, and she just wanted to get out of there. She finally got out of this mental institution by saying that she saw an angel, and the angel told her to wear the veil. It's really sad. But all I could think, like, she was asking for money online and saying, send it to my friend and then he can somehow buy me a plane ticket or something like that. And all I kept thinking was, like, she needs a Bitcoin wallet. We need to get her some Bitcoin, because if it were now, you could just buy a plane ticket directly with Bitcoin, and I mean, most of her problems would have been solved, and it would have been so much easier for her to get the funds that she needed. So I don't know what the answer is to solving the world's problems, but with certain individuals, if you have the power and the means to help, just by helping them learn about Bitcoin, then, I'm all for it. I like that idea. I think you had this idea, Justice, I don't know if you want to talk about it publicly, but you had this idea once about virtual tourism with Bitcoin, teaching people how to accept Bitcoin payments and in exchange for being basically virtual tour guides for people who in the West who want to see parts of India or whatever. I love that idea. There's also the Women's Annex, where there's these bloggers in Afghanistan where they get paid for their blog posts and social media reach, and they get paid in Bitcoin through the website. And it's amazing for them because they can't have money. They can't open a bank account. If they have any cash on them, their family takes it, their dad or their uncle or whatever. And so for a lot of these young women, this is like the first time in their life that they've actually had any kind of money that they can do anything with. And it's just amazing to see how that could potentially give them so much more freedom in so many different ways. So I love to hear those stories. They're too few and far between at this point, and each of us has the power to create more of them if we know of a situation where someone could be helped by just being educated about Bitcoin.
Those are some really amazing stories. I'd actually never heard either of those before. Maybe a big part of helping getting that word out would be when those stories show up, if we could somehow as a community get those wider play, because that's great real life example of Bitcoin improving the lives of real people.
Yeah, absolutely. I love how it just smashes these old traditions. I mean, in both the case of the women in Egypt and in the case of the Afghani bloggers, I mean, those are basically young women who are kind of being oppressed by culture, and you could argue that their families are playing a huge role. All these family systems, the domination culture, a culture that just doesn't want them to be free, and they're able to get around it now. There's the technology to help them do that.
Thanks for sharing those stories. Now I'm gonna move over to Dallas. I'm sure they have some questions over there, and then we'll switch back to Austin for Q&A from this side.
Hello. Yeah, we've got a question here from Peter. He's actually the owner of the first Dallas Bitcoin, so we're excited to have him here. Bitcoin ATM, but he's got a quick question.
Hi, my name's Peter with DFW Coin here in Dallas. I was wondering what your thoughts were on the Bitcoin Foundation and the coming fork that would maybe help scale the blockchain. Now we're limited to 7 transactions per second, and that's kind of laughable. And in order to scale the protocol, what are your thoughts on giving the Bitcoin Foundation the go-ahead to fork the blockchain?
Thanks, Peter. Well, I guess to start out with what I think about the Bitcoin Foundation, I'm not a big fan. It's pretty much been shown to be a corrupt dictatorship, or at least wants to be. I mean, they've got so much corruption in their membership. The way they don't have any transparency in their organization. The accounting's a mess. I mean, I think he's trying to make a comment, but I unfortunately can't hear it. But I don't think there should be a foundation or any kind of centralized organization that's in control of Bitcoin or that controls the code, because code is speech too, just like financial transactions. That's something that's really important. And the way Bitcoin started was that there had to be some kind of a consensus to make a major change in the protocol like that. As far as the block size, as I understand, it's not that much of a problem yet, so there's still time to kind of discuss it, and there's no need to make a rash decision right now, like a hard fork or anything like that. But I believe that people working together, the market, whatever you want to call it, will come up with some kind of solution if there's indeed a problem to solve. Without the Bitcoin Foundation, without the centralized authority.
So do we have any more questions from Dallas?
Thank you. Yeah, Leon's got a question here too.
Yeah, hi. My name is Leon. I have a question. I'm a developer and working on some Bitcoin apps right now, and I've heard Andre has been asked this question before, as what kind of applications would you like to see developers working on? And he mentioned working in the remittance space would be a great place to open up some businesses. I mean, that's also reaching out to the third world and empowering more people. What are your thoughts on future applications? What would you like to see developers working on?
Cool. Thanks for the question, Leon. I like that question. I'm not the best person to answer it. I think, maybe I have some pet applications that I would want to see, but what really matters is what the market wants to see or what everybody wants to see. But I can tell you my favorite of microlending. I've done a lot of speaking and research about microlending, and I'm just waiting for some big platform like Kiva or another microlending organization to somehow get connected with Bitcoin. I'm sure the regulations and the government stuff is what's holding them back, because Bitcoin could make their business so much easier. What a microlending organization does, for anybody who isn't familiar with it, is they broker transactions where there could be one or multiple lenders who capitalize loans or collateralize loans, and then the loans get dispersed to people in places of the world where they don't really have access to banking services, they don't have really access to credit, or many other banking services that we would take for granted here in the U.S. And this can be a really great economic opportunity for certain folks because they have the opportunity to start businesses and then they can grow and repay that capital. But the way that that's arranged right now is they have to kind of find these banks or banking organizations in, let's say, India or somewhere in South America to actually disperse the loans and to take the repayments, and then they have to interface back to Kiva, and it's a big mess. It's really complicated. So if there's some way to use cryptocurrency to simplify that process, I mean, there already are websites like BTC Jam and I forget what other ones are out there, but there's several websites where you can do peer-to-peer lending with Bitcoin. And it's based on sort of a reputation system, and there can be multiple lenders, multiple borrowers, and so forth. So I don't understand why those haven't really expanded into the microlending market yet. Maybe because people who need microloans don't know much about Bitcoin or don't know how to use it. But I'm sure there could be a broker who could help facilitate that kind of transaction too, where that maybe the broker in Argentina would get the Bitcoin and would give some pesos or dollars or whatever to the person who wants the loan. There's all kinds of creative solutions possible. So yeah, I'd like to see microlending. I'd also like to see, I guess I'd just like to see, I don't know, more support for privacy in general in Bitcoin software. Bitcoin wallets that have a lot of privacy features and that have built-in mixing that the user doesn't have to think about. That's really easy to implement. That's just sort of something I've always wanted to see in Bitcoin, and it's never been super easy to pull off.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks very much. We can turn it back over to Austin now.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I have a couple questions. So from the legal point of view, Bitcoin is completely allowed, but one of the murky things is the aspect of money laundering. That's the reason why the guy got incarcerated for 2 years. And like money laundering, or maybe a reason for minting or anything like that is for privacy concerns other than money laundering itself, like if that could be used for as an argument. But how do you circumvent that? Because whenever you use any of those services for privacy concerns, that could legally be used to send you to jail for money laundering. So how do you balance those two things together?
Yeah, well, I think right now you could arbitrarily be sent to jail for money laundering for kind of like sneezing the wrong way. It's very easy to run afoul of those laws because they're designed to be a big net that catches almost everybody. I mean, for instance, if you deposit over $3,000 into your bank account, just US dollars, nothing to do with Bitcoin, it triggers a suspicious activity report that goes to the government, and then they can follow up on that or not, or they can save it and see how many other ones you trigger. So, I mean, and cash, not only that, but cash is really kind of being criminalized in the U.S. If you've got too much of it, they start asking questions. You can't send it, you can't deposit it, can't do anything with it. And of course, if you're storing it in your home, it becomes fodder for civil asset forfeiture, where cops can just take it because it looks suspicious to have too much cash. You must be a drug dealer or something. there was a case of a guy who had like $40,000 in his basement because he was saving up to buy his daughter's college tuition. I'm sorry, I just had a glitch with the audio. But he was basically saving it up for his daughter's college tuition. He didn't trust the bank, didn't want to keep it in the bank. And somehow he, a cop was in his house and found it, and they took it. They just took it, and they can do it with impunity. And so Bitcoin is really great because it can help avoid those problems. But as far as like the legal concerns, I think if everyone's doing it, like if Bitcoin software has built-in privacy features that nobody has to think about, it's hard to make an argument that they're consciously trying to obfuscate what they're doing with their money. They're just taking a normal precaution, and there's really nothing that I see that's necessarily suspicious or wrong about it. I'm sure people use it for nefarious purposes, but they use a lot of dollars for nefarious purposes right now, and it doesn't seem to stop any kind of money laundering. It just seems to sort of stop people who want to use cash and make larger deposits in their bank accounts, cash businesses, and that kind of thing. So and also just the idea of like the word money laundering. I mean, what is actually the crime there? Like if you've used money to pay for a hitman, let's just say, or if you've used money to pay someone else to hurt somebody, that's a crime. That has a victim. Someone's been hurt, right? But the crime is not paying for it. The crime is not the act of transferring the money. The crime is the person getting hurt. I mean, that's what's wrong about it. If you try to obscure the source of where you got paid, I mean, I really look at that as just privacy. I don't think it automatically makes you a bad or shady person or anything like that. Privacy is kind of dead in this world, and I don't really blame anyone for wanting to get a little bit of it back. So I think it's kind of a long-winded answer, but I don't really think of a lot of the things that meet the legal definitions of money laundering as crimes with victims, as things that hurt anybody. What Charlie Shrem did, he didn't hurt anybody. He sold bitcoins to someone else who may have used them for buying drugs or something like that. And now he's going to be sitting in jail for 2 years. And even if he won't stand up for himself, I'll go on record and stand up for him and say that he didn't hurt anyone. I don't think what he did was wrong, and I certainly don't want to support in any way him sitting in a cage for that. And if everybody did this stuff, if everybody mixed their bitcoins or whatever, you wouldn't stand out if you were the one who did do it. So I think that's one of the reasons we need like default privacy features in Bitcoin wallets.
Thank you for your answer, by the way. Any specific things that I could, basically do for that? And also, you mentioned about civil forfeiture. There's a video with John Oliver talking about civil forfeiture, which is really funny and like very awesome. I don't know if you guys seen it, but where basically the government just takes, anyways. And then also the argument of privacy. So how do you explain this to somebody who is not aware of things, right? So the argument is, the argument, it's a fallacy. When somebody says, like, why do you need privacy? Why are you hiding, right? And then, how do you explain to somebody that privacy is something that it's a right that you have rather than something that you ask for?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a relevant question because it's not only meaningful in Bitcoin, but also in everything that we do on the internet, basically. Now we're in a world where we're being constantly surveilled. And yeah, there are politicians that say, well, if you don't have anything to hide, then you shouldn't be worried about anything. But the truth really comes in when you see that these politicians and government people, they want to have control of all the surveillance. They want to be the ones in control of it. The cops want to have the footage that shows their arrest taking place. And then, if maybe an arrest got botched or something, then they can lose the footage or it didn't come out right or something, and there's, something happens and it can't be used as evidence. But they don't want you to be on the other side of that camera. They don't want the citizens or just muggles to be in control of that footage. Same thing with the the NSA and government officials, they want to spy on everybody else, but they don't want those cameras turned back on them. You know, you go to an airport or something, there's millions of cameras pointed at you, but then there's no photography at the TSA checkpoints and things like that. So privacy and transparency can be great things, but there has to be, it depends who's in control of the information. You know, there has to be some kind of equality or fairness in who controls that footage or that information and what they're able to do with it. And right now we live in a society where there's a huge imbalance of power. There's a lot of inequality in terms of the powers that the state people, the government, and the politicians have to oppress normal people. And there's always the possibility that you'll be doing something that you don't think is wrong, but they get you for something anyway. There's a book out there called 3 Felonies a Day, and it actually details and goes through all the things that are illegal that people do on a regular basis without even knowing it. One of them's having expired prescriptions in your medicine cabinet. Like we said before, cash is becoming criminalized. A couple of quick stories. You know how you can't take more than $10,000 across the U.S. border, right? Well, there's been just so many stories of people who have had their life savings for one reason or another. They've had a bunch of cash and they've been crossing the border and just had it all taken from them. There's one guy I heard about who was in Canada, and he was crossing, I think, into the U.S. because he wanted to put a down payment on a piece of land. And he had just under $10,000. It was $9,996 or something like that in U.S. dollars going across the Canadian border. Well, while he was at the airport, the exchange rate fluctuated, okay? And it just put him right over that threshold of $10,000, and he had it all seized. And it was discovered by, you know, like a cash-sniffing dog. They actually have dogs that are designed to pick up cash, as if just having cash is somehow criminal. So, so many stories like that. There was a story of this lady was a dancer, and she had saved up a bunch of cash in like $1 and $5 bills because she's a stripper, and she was going to put a deposit down on a nightclub, and she was driving across country in New Jersey, something like that. She got pulled over by a cop. They found the cash in her trunk and they took it all. And it turned out that she was able to document that she earned all of it legitimately at her job, and she'd saved it up over 15 years. And eventually she went through this long court battle. It took a couple years. I think she eventually got it back, but how much did she have to pay in legal fees and lost time, and she essentially got robbed, and she couldn't buy her nightclub, which she wanted to do. So many stories like that. Another lady had $40,000 in cash in her duffel bag or something like that. It was her life savings. She was a maid, worked at a hotel, and she saved it up painstakingly over 20 years. Somebody found it, some dog alerted, and poof, her life savings is gone. So that kind of stuff happens all the time to completely innocent people that are later proven, when they go through court cases or whatever, to be totally innocent. And even if you have nothing to hide, even if you think you've done nothing wrong, there's always the chance that some law, because we have this convoluted legal system, could be used to get you. And so that's enough reason on its own to not want to be surveilled, to not want to give them the chance to get you for something.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Actually, one more comment on that real quick. If I were explaining to somebody, why I value financial privacy, if maybe they didn't get it, I would say, well, do you want to have all your transactions available on the internet? Do you want to go ahead and put all your bank statements and your tax returns and your pay stubs and your credit card statements up there on the internet for anyone to see and audit? I mean, that would take some nerve, and most people wouldn't want to because they'd be afraid. So sometimes all you have to do to explain it is just kind of turn it back around on them, and it'll click. They'll sort of get it. But with Bitcoin, the flip side of privacy is actually the transparency that it offers for maybe an organization like a charity or a board of directors, a company, to put their transactions on the blockchain and identify who controls which Bitcoin addresses and show the world, hey, this is what we've been spending, here's our accountability report, we have this much in our multi-signature address that we're holding for later, and this much was spent on this. So there's actually a great opportunity for transparency as well on the blockchain, as long as it's done voluntarily.
All right. Thanks for those answers. We really enjoyed the conversation, and it was great having you on.
Oh, great.
Thanks so much.
One more question.
We have another question.
One more question. Thank you so much. I like what you said about the internet thing. What sources or things, if I, like, because I only bought a Bitcoin like 2 weeks ago, that was my first time. What resources and I have found a lot, but any like few that you highly recommend that I should definitely go to and find more?
Bitcoin resources, just wallets or just general resources?
Is like the most, anything that you think is the go-to for like a newbie that like has done a week of research?
Wow, you know, I have to say you caught me flat-footed with that question because I don't really know of any great resources for newbies. My favorite way personally to learn about it and to teach other people about it is just to use it. You know, send and receive some Bitcoin, play around with different wallets, send and receive it to yourself. You know, download 2 wallets and send it back and forth to yourself until you get it. Help somebody else install a Bitcoin wallet and answer their questions, and you'll learn by doing. That's just my favorite way. But I would say one thing. When I first found out about Bitcoin, there was nobody even talking about the idea of multi-signature accounts, whereas now they're very easy to use. You can create one instantly at copay.io, or you can go to Pamela Morgan's guide, the multi-signature operating manual, which tells you how to do it like super securely for a company or something like that. And I would really recommend playing around with multi-signature wallets because they're really cool and they let you do some things that you can't do with a regular one signature Bitcoin address. So yeah, learn by doing, have fun.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. This has been great, and hope to have you on again as soon as possible.
Awesome. Thanks, Justice, for having me on. It was really great to join you guys, and thanks everybody for the questions. I really appreciate it.